Oh, that's a movie.
Yes. Not only do you have to watch somebody's homework slideshow, but you have to be videotaped enjoying it.
Okay.
So you're
All right.
Did you know that we were going to have a slideshow? North American snake. Yep.
There's 3 frogs in that picture. That's not a snake. That's
No. But there's the snake in the lower left. We're all waiting for her to have a meal. This is a little frog. This is of the genus Hyla, which is related to the South American and Central American tree frogs.
Let's see it.
There are only a few species in North America of that genus. There's my mom.
She takes a good picture.
This is just a friend standing at an unusual house in Alexandria, Virginia.
A very thin house. This is a flatlander's house.
She's holding it up.
It's a law office, and they have a little room with a dummy office in the very end here with some paintings on the wall and everything.
That's a very skinny house.
Yes, yes. So this is our first day in Costa Rica. We went to the National University, and this is a tree sloth. It's a 3-toed sloth. You can tell at the bottom. And the stripe on his back is lichens. You can't groom his back there, and there are some species of lichens that grow only on the backs of tree sloths.
They always grow in a striped form?
Yeah, yeah. It's not striped or blotched, but usually in a vertical stripe.
So these animals don't groom each other?
No, they're very solitary. A very large relative of the household philodendron. And this was my course coordinator. And a Costa Rican young man who's never been to school, but he's been taken on by various scientists at Los Salvas Biological Station. He's learned to speak English and write, and he knows all of the plants and animals by scientific name and so on.
That's the man standing behind her?
Yeah, eventually we may get him into college in the U.S. This is a man who would be perhaps working on a road crew because he has no other opportunities in life. This was the first field station we stayed at. It's literally a hut with no running water, no electricity, and nothing in the windows. There's not even a screen, but we're at a fairly high elevation. We stayed here for a week. This was all within various natural reserves, and that was our first laboratory. And I have this photo of the horse in here because although the pasture is really lush, the horse is rather skinny, and he's just been brought up from the lowlands. This grass has a fungus. The grass is African, and the fungus is also African. And the fungus gives all the animals that eat the grass severe diarrhea, and they can't digest the grass, and they lose a lot of weight, and they die, which is one of the reasons why cattle ranching in Central America is a disaster.
Because of
Even
importations
grass,
from Africa.
Well, yeah, there wasn't really any appropriate grass growing in Central America, so African varieties were brought in, and they brought the pests along with them. It just doesn't.
And how do the animals survive?
They're always on the
in
point of
Africa.
death.
No, in Africa.
In Africa, the fungus and the grass have a different relationship, I guess, because perhaps the environment is drier or hotter, or I don't know, the grass is
Or
burned
maybe the
over once
animals
a
are
year.
developed.
Yeah, possibly.
It's a beautiful picture.
Why, thank you. It's just a pretty picture and an interesting bug.
That's a pretty picture too.
Yeah. Then we went down into the lowlands to the rainforest, and this is a ornithologist from Louisiana State University. Although you can't see it, he's standing behind a net, a very fine black nylon.
You can see it.
Yeah, you can see some just by his wrist. And we catch birds in it because they fly into it, take them out, and we measure them. This is a standard technique in all bird research everywhere in the world. If we were doing a long-term study, we'd put a little band on his leg. And then we pose them for photographs. doesn't look very happy, but that's a typical posture for that particular species. They hunker down like that a lot. Some interesting plants. This is the national frog. This is also a tree frog.
Yeah.
That's the same frog? or not?
Yes, yeah.
How long is he?
He's about 3 inches from nose to the back of the sternum, so almost
Okay.
8 inches if you stretch his legs out.
Right.
He's quite large. This is the same genus as the little tree frog, the little gray frog at the beginning in New
Mhm.
Hampshire. And all of the genus have orange coloration on their underlimbs, and they're all cryptic when they have their legs folded underneath them. So you wouldn't
Like that.
necessarily see them, but then when they
Mhm.
move, they're very visible. And they crawl around. They have great, almost prehensile hands. And this is another little guy. And that's a caterpillar, which looks like moss. This was just a palm, and I took this photo because this is the margin of the penny. They're all fused together and they make this lovely scallop. Then we went to a truck stop on the Pan American Highway and stayed there for a week. This is a view of the Pacific Ocean from the Continental Divide. In the same spot,
See the
this is a
ocean.
photo of the Caribbean. Yeah. It's underneath the white clouds there, but
Mhm.
Okay.
you can almost see the...
You can see the shoreline.
Yeah, sort of. So, let's see if I can point up here. There's the peninsula.
Mhm.
Right.
Oops. There are only a few places in the world where you can see both Atlantic and Pacific at the same time. And we're there on a nice clear day. But it typically looks like this, very cloudy. That's raining down in the lowlands and we're up in the mountains. And this is a man's farm. And there's a 500 to 1,000 foot drop immediately behind this little hillock. And the farmer and his little children run about on it until the grade exceeds 45 degrees. And they cut down all the trees around their house for charcoal, which they're selling along the highway. And they go into bogs and collect the peat for these little baskets. And that's how they make their living. And they have a cow, very skinny cow in a large pasture.
For the same reason as the diarrhea caused by.
Yeah. It's just not it looks like a very fertile place, but it's not very good for domestic animals. And there are lots of lovely wildflowers.
Well, those are the kind of pictures my son goes for.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder if they interbred their cattle with African cattle, if they would find that they...
Most of the successful stocks have Indian Brahmin strains like they do here in Florida. This is your standard blackberry. It's been transported
This
all
New Hampshire
throughout
or-
the world. No, this is
No,
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica.
But many migrant birds feed on blackberries in North America and carry the seeds with them south. If the seed lands in a cool environment, such as a mountaintop, this was at 2 miles altitude. It was quite high elevation. And that's something else. And mosses. So I've been very interested in plants. This was the first lizard that I caught on the trip. And I haven't had it identified yet. This is a very primitive cactus. This was one of our professors. He came for about a week and a half, and this man specializes on orchid pollination systems. So we went to a forest, an oak forest, up in the mountains, for him to show us all about orchids, and he was demonstrating. And then we went out and sampled all the orchids in the forest. This is just one of them. Then we went to the south of the country near the Panamanian border and stayed at yet another field site, simply camps in an outhouse in the left-hand corner. And this is a typical field in Central America. Yeah, it's extremely hilly, and part of the forest deforestation problem is that once you cut on a slope that's greater than maybe 30%, 30 degrees, you get so much rainfall there that the soil gets saturated and it tends to slip. So you can see the hulks, the remains of these trees.
As well.
Yeah, looks just like around San Francisco, those slumping hills. You have the same problem in Central America. So people who get there later, who don't get there first, get the poor soil and the bad slopes. There's a student sitting in the upper trunk in this is the root
Stump in the
mass here.
foreground.
Yeah, stump is in the foreground. And the farmer had a little water wheel to generate enough electricity for his refrigerator and a VCR. And every night they watched Mexican cowboy movies.
How was the weather?
It rained every day. And it was cool and breezy, very much like spring in New England.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it rained a little while and it was pleasant.
Sounds
The
a
sun
bit like
would
San
shine.
Francisco too.
Yeah.
Sort of
What time of
damp and
year?
foggy.
This was June. They're
At 10,000 feet altitude.
they were in the early part of their rainy season.
Mhm.
Yeah, we were about 3,000 meters.
What is this?
This is some mosses and lichens. And really lousy forms down there. And this is the farmer's truck. But it broke down, so we stopped at this gas station, and in the window was a form about cholera.
Cholera.
And here's another page talking about all the things you can do to prevent getting cholera. It
Are
says,
they being contaminated?
yes, one of the recommendations is to add bleach to your drinking water. It's chlorine, just like,
We do the same
Other
thing
is
as
Public
the
water is
hamper,
chlorine.
we clean up the well in it.
yeah.
They've also got a picture of somebody throwing something into a toilet.
Throw your toilet paper in the toilet instead of in the garbage. In most of the world outside the United States, those people's sewer systems they're very small, cheap gauge pipes, and so people don't put any paper in the toilet in order to avoid clogging it. I don't know that throwing something in the toilet helps, because if it becomes clogged, there's really nothing they can do to unclog it, and then they have no toilet.
But they seem to be recommending this nonetheless.
That is what it looks like. Again, most people who get cholera don't have bathrooms at all. And one of the other recommendations here is not to do it out of doors. Well, that's nice if you have an alternative.
Yeah, that's pretty.
And there's a little building at the top of that clearing, and that was another field station. Again, no electricity or anything, simply a mountain cabin. We're on the edge of an extinct volcano, and you can just see the lip of the cavity behind the clearing. This is the view from the clearing out across the Pacific lowlands toward the ocean, and if it were clear, you could see the ocean from there. That's a live volcano back there, and behind it is the Nicaraguan border, Lake Nicaragua. Apparently, you used to be able, when the Spaniards arrived, they could sail all the way from the Caribbean into Lake Nicaragua and to the Pacific coast, which was only about 20 miles wide. And then in the 1700s, there was an eruption and an earthquake, and the whole Caribbean side of Central America lifted, and suddenly there were rapids separating Lake Nicaragua from the coast. And Costa Rica was developed by people who made an overland route from the Caribbean to the capital of Nicaragua. And this is a view on a clearer day out across the Santa Rosa Peninsula. And here's an example of what happens on slopes when you cut the forest down. The hillside slopes away.
Looks like I-75 in Kentucky.
Mhm.
Yeah, we've done the same thing here. On one of our projects, we ate bugs to test whether brightly colored bugs were unpalatable.
Somebody's doing a blindfold
What's
test?
unpalatable mean? They
It
all
doesn't
sound
taste good.
unpalatable.
Tastes nasty or has a unpleasant flavor.
I see that Coke is handy.
Yes, to wash out our mouths. That's right. We scored it for coloration. We wanted the person who did the tasting not to know whether the insect was brightly colored or not. And we did confirm our hypothesis. This is one we didn't eat. Bright colors don't taste good. No, they don't. No, they don't taste really good in any
Is that
case.
an insect?
Yeah.
Yes, that is. That's a leaf mimic. And he even has the midvein of the leaf and a little hole. It's actually a clear spot.
It's
but
a dead leaf mimic, isn't it? As they call it.
yeah,
Green
he's
leaf.
sort of green. It's the colors in this isn't very good.
There's one on page 60 of that book.
And this is an example of typical forest in that area. And as we went uphill, we came into cloud forest, which is cloudy.
Mm.
Are there any ancient Indian structures in this part?
Yes, everywhere. It's very hard to dig a hole anywhere in Central America without finding pot shards. I should say that in the view toward Nicaragua, we could see an airstrip where, what's his name, Oliver North,
Mm.
had his operations. And that's a nice fern. And this is an interesting caterpillar.
That's just
Yeah,
one.
they were quite small.
No, it's a whole bunch.
Large group. And we had nice sunsets there. So then we went down into the lowlands, and this is the mountain that we were on. This peak in the clouds back there. This is a dry forest with cactus. And this is a nice interaction between the grasshopper there, or katydid, and wasps. The katydids forage at night, and during the day they come back and they hang around the wasp nest. And the wasps hypothetically protect the katydid against predators. And something came in the night and ripped all of the cactus fruits open and ate them. And this was our room with our mosquito nets on the bunks and all our backpacks. We lived out of backpacks for 2 months. Nice iguana.
He's had some.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of
He's
those
about
boots
3
he's
feet
wearing.
long. That's a big adult. They're very popular as pets, and they make good food too. They're supposed to taste like chicken.
Is that an iguana or is that a...
That's an iguana. Iguana. And this is just a typical canoe on a typical river in the lowlands. And Volcan Arenal, which is the most active and violent volcano in all of Central America at present. And it had a little hiccup while we were there, which caused an interesting cloud formation to ripple down off the peak. Doesn't show very well in this slide though. Went to Peru to my advisor's field station in the Amazon jungle forest, I'll call it. And here we are in the airport at Lima, where we had to hire 6 people to help us get our luggage to the car, and they all stood around, of course, with advice about how to tie the trunk down.
See, there's a Unisys poster in the back. That's a big American company.
Yeah.
Computer company and other things.
Well, once we had everything packed, they discovered that they couldn't go anywhere because the car wouldn't start. And Lilo is like, it was out of a Mad Max movie. It's just dust and dirt and destruction. It was amazing. And then we flew to Cusco, and the very next morning we went out across the plains in a small bus for a full day's ride. So this is these are the high plains of southern Peru, Inca territory. This is where all of your llama sweaters come from, alpaca sweaters. And I slept most of the way, but I did stop at one point for a break, and I saw these butterflies.
Is that color reasonably accurate?
Yes. Yeah, that's very accurate.
You see where they get some of the colors in their woven
No,
goods.
the butterflies were absolutely stunning, just amazing. I don't have nearly enough photos of them.
This is how you went down the Amazon?
Yeah, after riding down from 3,200 meters, or 12,000 feet, 10,000 feet, into the Amazon basin, we got into this boat. It's a dugout canoe with sides added on. We floated downriver. I guess there were about 9 of us. This is my advisor's uncle. I think he's 82 years old. And this was his tent when he was a young man. It's oiled canvas. And it comes with no poles, so each night he went out and found himself some poles.
Oh boy, what a challenge.
So he's been going there for 60 years now?
No,
With
this
the
is the
same
first
tent?
time he'd ever been here. He hadn't used the tent in about 40 years. We gave the tent away to the Indians when he left.
And they ate it.
Oh, well, we thought they might be able to use the canvas for something. Yeah. And here we arrived after 2 days on the river, 2.5 days, at our field station.
Is that silt, that bank?
Yes, at the beginning of the rainy season, the river floods and it washes away all the banks. And then later in the rainy season, it deposits huge masses of sand. And then in the dry season, it cuts out a new channel again.
That's basically stuff that's washed down from the mountain.
Yeah, yeah. But it's simply very fine sand.
Mm.
This was our kitchen. Basic amenities, we had a little hand pump. We pumped water from the lake, and we swam and bathed off that log, and we washed all of our clothes by hand. And there I'm sitting on the steps of the bathhouse. And here I'm working at night. We had some
Looks
solar
like it
panels.
agrees with you.
Yeah, it was pleasant. If we didn't have enough sunshine during the day, the solar panels didn't charge up our car batteries sufficiently, and we only had maybe an hour or two of fluorescent lights, after which you could either work by candlelight or go to bed. So everyone slept about 9 or 10 hours a night. Because it was a fairly rainy season that year. Yeah. Oh, and you can see
What
the candle in
month
the
was
background.
this?
I'm sorry?
What time of year was this?
This was September.
Which
Perhaps
is
we've
spring.
gotten into October. Yeah, their rainy season starts in October. Because we're in the southern hemisphere. The days got longer and longer and longer as we stayed. By the time we left in November, it was light before 6 in the morning. This typical roof. Our roofs were made like this too, but this is from another building. And here's my tent, where I slept for 2.5 months.
Did you carry that tent with you, or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a very small.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there mosquitoes?
That was a bed for 2.5
Yes, there are.
How do you prevent them from?
Well, the tent has a little screen, and I try to get in and out of the tent as fast as possible. I wear lots of mosquito repellent and long sleeve shirt and long pants at all times.
Yeah.
But your neck is not covered. Your neck is not covered.
Mosquito spray.
No, but I usually have a lot of mosquito repellent on. And the amazing thing is, with the plastic tarp on top and on the ground, I never got wet, even in torrential rainstorms.
Good.
Yeah.
Was that tarp?
It was mostly the
That's good.
plastic tarp. Got it at U-Haul for $10. Yeah, it was a real bargain. So after we arrived, the river dropped a lot, about another 3 feet. which made it very difficult to get out of the boats. This is a dugout canoe that the Indians on the river traditionally make, and they made one. They made several for us, but this was our old one. It's simply a passiflora belonging to the passion fruit family. And here's another one. They have a close relationship with ants. At the base of the flowers there are little nodules where proteins are produced, and the ants feed on the flower at these little production centers, and they, at the same time, they guard the flower. They're called nectaries,
From what?
or fruit bodies.
What are they guarded from? Fruit flies, you say?
They are protecting the flower against, for the most part, crickets, grasshoppers, which will eat anything, caterpillars, and other herbivores or plant eaters. Now, the pollinator is supposed to be a particular species of hummingbird that forages near the forest floor, which is why this one is in fact on the ground. Although most of the vine is way up in the canopy, 30 meters up. And we went upriver to, well, there are two tribes of native Indians, the Machigenga and the Yaminawa. The Machigenga have been contacted for about 20 years, and the Yaminawa have only had contact with Spanish-speaking Western people for 5. These are Yaminawas, and we passed them on the river. They have no motors. They pole their way upriver. It's the entire village in that little boat. They asked us for a tow, so we took them all into our boat and pulled them upriver for a half hour, which saved them probably 3 hours of pulling. And
That's the entire people in the village?
yeah, they had to come out from the forest because they got yellow fever. Somebody contacted some missionaries came to a village nearby of the Machigengas, and the Machigengas had contact with the Yaminawas, and they all got sick.
How many in the village? 15, 20, 25?
I think there are 15 adults and 3 children, and all the children are born since the epidemic. All the small children at the time died. They have clothing now only because they're returning from downstream where they went to see a missionary and they were given clothes. Normally they wear just a little string girdle. And we could not communicate with them at all. These are the other tribes, the Machigengas, and they are making a canoe for us. So they've cut down a big cedar tree here. And they use an axe and a saw. It's one of those old-fashioned saws that 2 people pull from either end. And
In fire?
They just have a stick there for the handle at the bottom of the picture down here. And then, yes, then they'll clean out the bottom of the canoe. They'll dig it out with fire and plane it off with their axes and eventually deliver it to us. And this man is getting a shortwave radio for pretty much a year of all of their discretionary labor. And he considers himself very fortunate. And this is their camp. The man there in the white shirt is our boat driver. And he's been offered masate by the woman. And this is a drink made by chewing yucca and spinning it into a bowl and letting it ferment.
Chewing your what?
She chewed
Yucca.
a root, a white starchy root, and spat it out into a bowl and let it ferment. And then she offered it to all of us.
Oh, very special.
Was it good? Was it good?
It was sour. It was like sour beer, but white. I only tasted it. You cannot refuse to try this, but
What is fruit? Manioc or tapioca or what?
it's the same. Yeah. this is their permanent village. They were all they lived here in turns while they worked on the boat. They don't like living in the forest because whenever it rains frequently, limbs fall. It's very dangerous to be under a tree at night because of the chance of something falling on you.
That happens in Gainesville too.
So they tend to live in clearings, and keep all of the vines and things from growing up. This is it. Each little family group has a little platform with a roof, and then they have some mosquito netting, which they trade with us for fruit. They trade us fruit and yucca, and we give them mosquito netting. And
This is in Brazil now, or
this is
still Peru?
Peru. It's close to the border with Bolivia and Brazil.
But you're already on one of the tributaries to the Amazon?
Yes, we are. Yeah, we certainly are in the Amazon basin. And we bought another little canoe from them. And down in the bottom of the boat we have some papaya, bananas, avocados, some yucca, and some squash. And that's all the fresh food that we ever had to eat was what we could trade with them. And usually it was only one or two things at a time. So we would have 100 pounds of papaya to eat all at once. That's just a nice horned owl. Yeah. This doesn't come out well. This is a fasciated tiger heron. And at the bottom of the log down there are giant otters. They're about 5 feet long and quite a ways away. They are spectacular and they're very endangered. Our lake had 7. Horned toad. And the baby caiman.
What's that?
That's a grasshopper. There's a flower here. This is the flower of a tagua palm. And tagua is being used by some clothing manufacturers here in the U.S. because the nut is very hard and pearly. And it looks a little bit like ivory. It's what they call vegetable ivory. And it grows wild in the forest and is collected by indigenous people. And they sell it downriver. It's all collected from the forest, so it's called a forest product. And it eventually makes it onto expensive clothes from Banana Republic and so on. This was my study plant. I was interested in the morphology of the leaves and how they vary with light levels and other environmental conditions. Snake.
How big was that? About as big around
This is a real, like
as the
as wide as your
person's little
pinky.
finger?
Yeah, yeah. A little tiny one. And this was about an 8-inch turtle with some ticks growing on it. I never thought that turtles could have ticks.
On the shell?
You wouldn't think they would do much
on the
damage
shell.
to the shell, would
Well,
they? Can they get blood?
I don't know, but there's some scarring. This may be some scarring here on the. This particular animal had obviously had regular tick infestations because there were irregular parts elsewhere on his shell. And this is a lovely tree that produces thorns.
That's a
Those
natural
are
part of the tree
those,
that's
yes,
not on
yeah,
our
those
side.
those are about 2.5 or 3 inches long. And the Panama hat palm. It's actually not a palm. And the Panama hat has never been made in
More like
Panama.
a cactus.
Yeah.
Is it a cactus?
No, it's I think it's a kind of grass related to cycloids, to those, well, it's one of those strange things that people haven't been able to classify. The botanists are don't know what to do with it, but it's considered to be a very primitive plant. And it has, the flowers are produced on these stalks. These are actually the fruit at the top, and it's finished flowering. Flowers stick out between, in the interstices between each of these little, whatever you want to call the clump things. And each species has a different pattern on this stalk. And supposedly a lot of the designs in Mayan artwork came from these plants. The pattern of the fruiting structures.
How big was that fruit in real life?
This whole thing was about 6 inches long.
Okay.
So each of those little seeds at the top were about the size of a small bean.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we'll start some nice pictures here. All right, we're back in Cusco. We came out the same way we went in. Cusco's a city of adobe and clay. And about every 10th house is actually a little brick making business. They simply cut down into the soil as far as the rich clay soils will last, and they chop out little pieces like people made bricks from dried peat or cut peat out in the British Isles. So to tell you some more examples, we took the local train to Machu Picchu down in the valley. And this was the heartland of the Inca Empire. They still run, the people living in these valleys run their flocks throughout the valley without fences. Each herd has a shepherd or shepherdess somewhere about sitting on the grass and watching them. And then they have irrigated fields. It's mostly corn. And this is an example of a traditional Inca woman, and of the dried mud construction of the buildings behind her.
That's pretty thick.
Yeah, they're thick and worn.
Roofs are made of what?
Either
Tiles.
thatch
Stones.
or clay tiles or bits of shale or wooden shingles.
Those are clay tile there?
Yeah, looks like
Yeah, I think they're clay. They're all made by hand, very laboriously, sometimes by the owner of the house. These are some old Inca terraces which are still being used. They're still in production. And that line across the hillside is an old irrigation canal, and judging by the green along it, I'd say it's still in operation. So that's what's irrigating these pastures here, although in the lower right you can see a river. They have no electricity for the most part, so they have no way of pumping the water from the river up to the fields. They have to run irrigation channels, sometimes hundreds of miles back into the mountains, to the headwaters of that same river in order to bring water down to their fields. The Incas had lots and lots of manpower, so they did this routinely throughout Peru.
So they don't have work animals that would operate a pump then?
They
the way do it.
never invented many mechanical devices. They didn't have carts. They didn't even use sledges.
Josh will get it.
They knew how to make things with stone, but for the most part, they didn't have any
What-
construction materials.
How do they bring the water down from the mountain? Must-
They made
Canals?
stone. They made stone-lined canals or mud canals. Yeah.
And the
Just
pitch
like
is so
an
steep,
aqueduct.
the pitch is so steep that they don't have cement or anything in there.
No, they were incredibly well designed so that there wouldn't be any turbulence in the water to wear holes in the canal or the aqueduct and so on.
No, but I'm wondering about leaking out.
Most of them don't work anymore because they weren't maintained. They were one of the masterworks of the
Incan Empire.
outside of the Western world. You can see there's lots of snow up there in the mountains, even though this is
They
summertime.
don't use feeds, I guess they don't want to feed them, they don't want
They had llamas. They had 6 different varieties that they had bred, from very small to very large, and each one for its particular kind of use. The very big ones were pack animals, and they were given packs. They carried things on their backs, but no more than that. The people were used for most of the heavy labor, other than carrying things. This is simply another shot of this.
Very pretty picture.
Yeah. There had been an old bridge across the river. I assume it was yet another hemp bridge. They made rope bridges. But this one is long gone. And
Wow.
here we are at Machu Picchu, which
I
is...
wouldn't say that.
He's really standing out up.
He's a smart,
Yay.
smart, brave guy.
Well, that's me.
Sheesh.
Is it as scary as it looks?
Yes. I mean, where I'm standing, the wall goes down about 50 feet, and the slope below it it's almost vertical. And it's astonishing that the buildings are there at all. I thought this was cute. These are some of
It is.
my colleagues, right?
Coming, going,
And one looks like he's crawling out of the backpack of it.
exploring the ruins.
Right. And then the people who lived in the ruins grew all of their food right there where they were. They had their own irrigation system coming down from the ridge above them.
Oh, that is beautiful.
And these are many hundreds of years old?
The Machu Picchu was
Terraces.
constructed in the 200 years just prior, 100 years just prior to the conquistadors
It
getting
looks
there.
like a nice air there.
Yeah.
Nice light.
So in the 1400s,
And all these terraces were put up at that time?
yeah, they were pretty much made all at one shot. And then they had houses for the people living there. This is the end wall of the house, and it has no roof, but they've been doing some restoration, and this is a house with what they think is an authentic, or what an authentic roof would look like. And they use those little posts sticking out of the wall to strap down the roof.
That was the size of that beam.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would have had finished beams. And then to get from one, I like this shot particularly, to get from one terrace to the other, they had little steps in the wall, which were just long, oblong pieces of granite that they let stick out of the wall. And they have stairs everywhere, lots and lots of stairs. This is an example of one of their small irrigation channels. At the end of the outer edge of each terrace, they had a channel to carry away any excess water to the level below it. And a lot of the terraces at Machu Picchu have little channels that run down into the city proper. They had 2-story houses, and this is looking from uphill down into a house. The second floor obviously is gone. They just laid beams from one end, from the ledge that you see in the picture, across, and put matting on top of that. This was, I guess, largely a ceremonial city. I like that they cut many of the steps out of solid pieces of granite. So they are carved out instead of being constructed on top of a ledge. And
They were really masons, weren't they?
well, this is some archaeologists are reconstructing. Much of Machu Picchu had fallen
I see the
down.
numbers on them.
Yeah, what they've done is they've marked original walls, and they've photographed and mapped everything so they can take it down and dig around the base for other stones and fix the foundations, then they can put everything back the way it was. So what happened to the I had some photos of the guys doing the work. Here
There
they
they
are.
are.
Yeah. And they're hard at work reconstructing the wall.
Looks like our backyard.
This is part of the water system in the city itself. They very carefully got stilling pools so that water will run through a channel down the face of a stone into a pool, a calming pool, and then when the pool is full, it will run off across another stone. So there's no noise of trickling water, but there is lots of water. And they did amazing work. They had no metal tools. They knew about bronze, but that's a very soft metal. They did all of this with other stones, hacking away. And here's an example of the water being run over a lip down the rock to quiet it. And this is looking down from one of the battlements, down into the valley. That was Machu Picchu.